July 20th, 2017. Palos Verdes Estates, California, 9:00 a.m. The housekeeper arrived at the Bennington home for her regular Thursday shift. She walked through the house, doing her usual routine. Kitchen, living room, upstairs. Then she opened the door to the bedroom and screamed. Chester Bennington, the voice that had screamed for millions of broken kids around the world, was hanging from the bedroom door, a belt around his neck, his body lifeless, his eyes closed. He was 41 years old. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but there was nothing they could do. Chester had been dead for hours. On the nightstand, his phone was open to a text conversation with his wife, Talinda. She'd left that morning for a trip to Arizona. They'd said, "I love you." Everything seemed normal, but nothing was normal. Because July 20th wasn't just any day. It was Chris Cornell's birthday. Chris, Chester's best friend, his mentor, his brother, who had hanged himself just 2 months earlier. And now Chester had chosen the same day, the same method, the same tragic end. The news broke within hours. Social media exploded. Fans around the world collapsed in grief. Linkin Park's music started trending worldwide. The band that had given voice to a generation's pain had lost its voice. Now let me tell you the real story of Chester Bennington, the abused kid from Arizona who became the soundtrack to millions of broken souls, fought demons nobody could see, and lost the battle on the one day that proved he'd never recovered from his best friend's death. This is the story of the scream that saved millions but couldn't save itself. Part 1. The boy who couldn't speak long before the screams, long before the stadiums, long before Linkin Park. There was a boy in Phoenix, Arizona, who learned to stay silent. Chester Charles Bennington was born on March 20th, 1976, in Phoenix. His father, Lee, was a police detective. His mother, Susan, was a nurse. They divorced when Chester was 11. On the surface, it seemed like a normal, middle-class childhood. But it wasn't. From the age of 7 to 13, Chester was sexually abused by an older male friend. The abuse happened repeatedly, for 6 years, and Chester told no one. "I was afraid," he would later say. "Afraid nobody would believe me. Afraid they'd think I was gay. Afraid they'd think I wanted it." The shame and trauma consumed him. He became withdrawn, angry, confused. "I started to hate myself," Chester recalled in a 2008 interview. "I felt dirty, broken, like I was worthless." His parents were going through their own divorce during this time. Nobody noticed Chester was falling apart. At 11, Chester started using drugs, marijuana at first, then anything he could get his hands on, cocaine, methamphetamine, LSD. "The drugs made me feel less," he said, "and I wanted to feel less. I wanted to disappear." By 13, the abuse finally stopped when the family moved, but the damage was done. Chester became angrier, more violent. He'd get into fights at school, destroy property, scream at his parents. "I was full of rage," he said, "and I didn't know what to do with it." His only outlet was music. Chester discovered bands like Depeche Mode, Stone Temple Pilots, and 9 Inch Nails. The raw emotion in the music spoke to him. "When I heard those songs, I felt understood," Chester said, "like someone else felt what I felt." At 16, Chester joined his first band, a local group called Grey Days. He was the lead singer. And when Chester sang, something happened. All that rage, all that pain, all that trauma, it came pouring out. His voice was unique. He could sing melodically one moment, then scream with such raw intensity it gave people chills. "When Chester screamed, you felt it," said one bandmate. "You felt every ounce of pain he was carrying." Grey Days played local clubs in Phoenix, built a small following, released a couple of independent albums. But Chester was still struggling, still using drugs heavily, still battling depression. At 23, he married his first wife, Samantha. They had a son, Jaime. But the marriage was rocky from the start. Chester was touring with Grey Days, drinking constantly, using cocaine and methamphetamine. He was spiraling. In 1998, everything fell apart. Samantha left him. Grey Days broke up. Chester was broke, addicted, and suicidal. "I wanted to die," he later admitted. "I was 22, divorced, no money, no future. I thought about ending it all the time. But then he got a phone call that would change everything. A band in Los Angeles was looking for a singer. They'd heard Chester's demos. They wanted him to audition. The band was called Zero, but they'd soon become known as Linkin Park. And Chester Bennington was about to become the voice of a broken generation. Part 2, Hybrid Theory, The Sound of Pain, 1999, Los Angeles. Chester drove from Phoenix to LA to audition for Zero. He was nervous, broke, still using drugs. The band consisted of Mike Shinoda, rapper-producer, Brad E. Delson, guitar, Rob Borden, drums, Dave Phoenix Farrell, bass, and Joe Hahn, DJ turntables. They'd been searching for a singer for months. Nobody fit. Then Chester walked in. Mike Shinoda played him a rough demo of a song called In the End. Chester listened once, then asked if he could try singing it. What happened next shocked everyone in the room. Chester sang the verses with a vulnerable, emotional tone. Then, in the chorus, he unleashed a scream that rattled the walls. "We all just looked at each other," Mike Shinoda later recalled, like, "Holy shit, that's it, that's the sound." Chester was in. Zero changed their name to Hybrid Theory, then finally to Linkin Park, after Linkin Park in Santa Monica. For the next year, they wrote and recorded their debut album in a small studio. Chester was living in his car between sessions, still struggling with addiction. But when he was in the booth, singing, everything made sense. The album they created, Hybrid Theory, was unlike anything else in rock music. It blended rap, rock, electronic music, and raw emotion. Mike rapped, Chester sang and screamed. The lyrics dealt with feelings of isolation, frustration, and internal struggle. Songs like One Step Closer, Crawling, In the End, and Paper Cut captured exactly what millions of young people were feeling but couldn't articulate. When Hybrid Theory was released on October 24, 2000, nobody expected what would happen next. The album exploded. One Step Closer became a rock radio hit. Crawling won a Grammy. In the End became one of the biggest rock songs of the decade. The album sold 4.8 million copies in its first year. It eventually sold over 27 million copies worldwide, becoming one of the best-selling albums of all time. And Chester Bennington, the abused, addicted kid from Phoenix, became a global rock star. But success didn't fix his problems. "I thought fame would make me happy," Chester said. "It didn't. I was still the same broken person, just with more money and more cameras." Linkin Park toured relentlessly, 300-plus shows, all over the world. Chester was performing every night, screaming his pain for thousands of people, and they screamed back. Fans would come up to Chester after shows, crying, telling him his music saved their lives. "I can't tell you how many kids told me they didn't kill themselves because of our songs," Chester said. "That's heavy. That's a responsibility I took seriously." In 2003, Linkin Park released their second album, Meteora. It was even bigger than the first. Numb, Faint, Somewhere I Belong, Breaking the Habit, every single was a massive hit. The band was selling out stadiums, winning awards, dominating MTV and radio. But Chester was falling apart again. The touring was brutal, the pressure was immense, and Chester went back to old habits. He started drinking heavily again, using cocaine. The demons he'd been running from were catching up. In 2006, during a tour, Chester had a moment of clarity. "I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself," he said. "I was destroying everything I'd worked for. I had to stop." He checked into rehab, got sober, started therapy to deal with the childhood abuse. "That's when I really started healing. Chester said. Not just getting clean, but actually confronting what happened to me. He started speaking publicly about the abuse, about his addiction, about depression. If I can help one person by sharing my story, it's worth it, he said. In 2006, Chester married Talinda Bentley, a model and former Playboy model. She would become his rock. Talinda saved me, Chester often said. She saw me at my worst and loved me anyway. They had 3 children together. Chester also had 3 children from previous relationships, 6 kids total. Being a father became Chester's greatest joy. My kids gave me a reason to stay alive, he said. When I felt like giving up, I'd think of them. Linkin Park continued to evolve. Musically, albums like Minutes to Midnight, 2007, 1,000 Suns, 2010, and Living Things, 2012, showed growth and experimentation. Not every fan loved the new direction. Some wanted the old screaming Linkin Park, but Chester didn't care. We're not going to make the same album over and over, he said. We have to grow. In 2013, Chester joined Stone Temple Pilots as their new lead singer after Scott Weiland was fired. It was a dream come true. STP was one of his favorite bands growing up, but it was short-lived. Chester left in 2015 to focus on Linkin Park. By 2017, Chester seemed to be in a good place, sober for years, happy with his family, working on new Linkin Park music. In May 2017, Linkin Park released One More Light, their most pop-influenced album yet. Critics trashed it. Longtime fans hated it. The backlash was brutal. Chester took it personally. We put our hearts into that album, he said in an interview, and people shit all over it. But there was something else happening, something nobody saw. Chester's best friend was about to die, and it would destroy him. Part 3, Chris Cornell, the loss that broke him May 17, 2017. Detroit, Michigan. Chris Cornell, lead singer of Soundgarden and Audioslave, hanged himself in his hotel room after a concert. He was 52 years old. When Chester got the news, he was devastated. Chris wasn't just a fellow musician. He was Chester's mentor, his brother, his hero. They'd met years earlier and bonded immediately. Both struggled with addiction. Both dealt with depression. Both understood the weight of being the voice for millions of hurting people. Chris was like a big brother to me, Chester said. He understood me in a way most people didn't. At Chris's funeral, Chester sang Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. His voice cracked with emotion. Tears streamed down his face. After the funeral, Chester wasn't the same. He became withdrawn, quieter. His wife, Talinda, noticed he was struggling but thought he'd work through it like he always had. Chester started drinking again, not heavily, but drinking nonetheless. He was hurting, Talinda later said. Losing Chris broke something in him. Linkin Park was scheduled to tour that summer to support One More Light. Chester seemed excited about it. On July 6, 2017, Linkin Park performed on Jimmy Kimmel Live. It was their first performance of the new album. Chester sang Heavy and One More Light, 2 deeply personal songs about struggling with darkness. Watching the performance now is haunting. Chester looked tired, sad, like he was saying goodbye. On July 14th, Linkin Park played a show in Birmingham, UK. It would be Chester's final performance. During One More Light, a song written about losing friends, Chester broke down crying on stage. He could barely get through it. Fans in the audience cried with him. Nobody knew it would be the last time they'd see him. After the show, Chester flew back to Los Angeles. The band had a break before the next leg of the tour. On July 19th, Talinda left for Arizona with the kids. Chester stayed home. They texted that night, "I love you. Love you too." Everything seemed normal, but it wasn't. July 20th, 2017. Chester woke up alone in the house. It was Chris Cornell's birthday. Chris would have been 53. Chester had been thinking about Chris constantly for 2 months. The grief was overwhelming. At some point that morning, Chester made a decision. He went to the bedroom, took a belt, secured it to the bedroom door, and hanged himself. When the housekeeper found him around 9 a.m., it was too late. Chester Bennington was gone. The Los Angeles County coroner confirmed it was suicide by hanging. Toxicology reports showed a small amount of alcohol in his system, but no illegal drugs. No suicide note was found. But the timing, Chris Cornell's birthday, was the message. Chester couldn't live without his friend. The grief had swallowed him whole, and the world lost the voice that had saved millions. Part 4. The Aftermath. A World in Mourning. When news of Chester's death broke, the internet exploded. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Fans around the world were posting tributes, crying, sharing stories of how Linkin Park's music had saved their lives. The hashtag #JustRipChester trended worldwide for days. Celebrities mourned publicly. Elton John, Rihanna, Jimmy Page, Korn, Metallica. Everyone from the music world paid tribute. Mike Shinoda, Chester's bandmate and closest friend in Linkin Park, was shattered. "I'm in shock," he tweeted. "I can't believe this is real." The remaining members of Linkin Park released a statement. "Our hearts are broken. Chester was the best husband, father, and friend. The world has lost a great talent and an even greater person." Talinda posted a photo of her and Chester on Instagram with the caption, "I'm broken. My babies are broken. I don't know how to move forward." Chester's 6 children were devastated. His oldest son, Jaime, wrote, "I love you so much, Dad. I wish I could have saved you." On July 29, 2017, a private funeral was held for Chester. Friends, family, and the music community gathered to say goodbye. Then, on October 27, 2017, Linkin Park held a public memorial concert at the Hollywood Bowl called Linkin Park and Friends Celebrate Life in honor of Chester Bennington. Over 10,000 fans attended. Musicians who had worked with Chester performed his songs. Blink 182, Korn, System of a Down, A Day to Remember, all paid tribute. When the band performed One More Light, the entire stadium sang Chester's parts. Thousands of voices united in grief. There wasn't a dry eye in the venue. Mike Shinoda later said, "That night showed us how much Chester meant to people. His voice will never die." In the months following Chester's death, conversations about mental health exploded. Suicide hotlines saw a spike in calls. Mental health organizations saw increased donations. People started talking more openly about depression. "Chester's death forced a conversation we needed to have," said one mental health advocate. "We can't ignore mental illness anymore. It kills." Talinda Bennington became an advocate for mental health awareness. She started the 3&20 Changes Direction campaign to promote mental health education. "Chester would want his death to mean something," Talinda said. "If we can save one life by talking about this, it's worth it." Mike Shinoda released a solo album in 2018 called Post-Traumatic, dealing with the grief of losing Chester. "I had to process this somehow," Mike said. "Music is how I heal." Linkin Park has not performed or released new music since Chester's death. The band hasn't broken up officially, but they've said they can't imagine continuing without him. "Chester was irreplaceable," Mike said. "There's no Linkin Park without Chester." In 2020, the band released a 20th anniversary edition of Hybrid Theory with unreleased demos and previously unheard Chester vocals. Hearing his voice again, raw, powerful, full of pain, was emotional for fans. "It's like hearing a ghost," one fan wrote. "Beautiful and heartbreaking." Part 5. The Legacy, the Scream That Never Dies. More than 6 years have passed since Chester Bennington's death, and his voice is still everywhere. Linkin Park's music streams billions of times annually. New generations discover their songs on TikTok, Spotify, YouTube. Numb has over 1.7 billion views on YouTube. In the End has over 1.4 billion. Kids who weren't even born when hybrid theory came out are finding solace in Chester's screams. "His music helped me through my darkest times," wrote one Gen Z fan. "Even though he's gone, his voice is still saving lives." That's Chester's legacy. Not the awards, not the album sales, but the lives saved. Thousands, maybe millions, of people have said Linkin Park's music kept them from committing suicide. Chester's raw honesty about pain, depression, and struggle gave voice to people who felt voiceless. "He screamed what we couldn't say," one fan explained. "He made us feel less alone." But Chester's death also highlighted a tragic irony. The man who saved so many couldn't save himself. "That's the cruelty of depression," said a mental health expert. "You can help others while drowning yourself." Chester knew how to save everyone but himself. In interviews before his death, Chester talked about this responsibility. "I carry the weight of people's pain," he said. "When someone tells me my music saved their life, I feel honored, but I also feel the pressure. What if I let them down?" That pressure, combined with unresolved trauma, addiction struggles, and the loss of Chris Cornell, became too much. Chester's influence on rock music is undeniable. Bands like Bring Me the Horizon, I Prevail, Bad Omens, and countless others cite Linkin Park as a major influence. The blend of rap, rock, and raw emotion that Linkin Park pioneered became a blueprint for an entire generation of bands. "Linkin Park opened the door for what rock music could be," said one music critic. "They proved you could be heavy and melodic, aggressive and vulnerable, all at once." Chester's vocal style, switching seamlessly between singing and screaming, influenced countless vocalists. "Chester showed us you didn't have to choose," said a rock vocalist. "You could be soft and brutal in the same song. That's powerful." But beyond music, Chester's openness about abuse, addiction, and mental health changed the conversation. Male rock stars weren't supposed to talk about being victims. They weren't supposed to admit weakness. Chester did, and it gave millions of men permission to do the same. "Chester made vulnerability cool," said a fan. "He showed us that admitting you're hurting isn't weakness, it's courage." In Phoenix, Arizona, a mural of Chester was painted downtown. Fans leave flowers and notes. In Los Angeles, fans gather at the Hollywood Bowl every year on July 20th to honor his memory. The Linkin Park fan community remains one of the most dedicated in music. They keep Chester's memory alive through tribute concerts, charity work, and mental health advocacy. "We're Chester's legacy," one fan organizer said. "We carry his message forward." Chester Bennington remarried in 2020. She continues her mental health advocacy work. Chester's children are growing up. Some have pursued music. All carry their father's legacy with pride. "I want people to remember my dad for the joy he brought," said one of his sons, "not just the sadness of how he died." Mike Shinoda has hinted that Linkin Park may one day return in some form, but he's clear it won't be the same. "Chester was one of a kind," Mike said. "Nobody can replace him, and we won't try." Epilogue: the voice that lives forever. If Chester Bennington had lived, what would he have done? More albums with Linkin Park? More collaborations? More advocacy work? We'll never know. All we have are 41 years, a body of work, a voice captured in recordings, and millions of people whose lives were touched by that voice. Chester Bennington was broken. He carried trauma from childhood. He battled addiction. He fought depression his entire life. But he transformed that pain into art, into connection, into hope for others. He screamed so that others didn't have to scream alone. And even though he's gone, that scream echoes. Every time someone listens to Crawling and feels understood, every time someone hears One More Light and decides to stay alive, every time someone watches an old Linkin Park concert and feels Chester's energy, the voice lives on. Chester Bennington was a son, a husband, a father, a friend, a musician, an advocate. He was imperfect, struggling, human, but he was also a light in the darkness for millions. And that light doesn't go out just because the person who carried it is gone. It lives in the music, in the memories, in the lives saved. Rest in peace, Chester. Your scream saved millions. We just wish someone could have saved you.